Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at another budget deck for BT06 for you to use, and this is going to be a black Reboot budget deck. So we're still going to be using a lot of the Reboot cards that we were using in the previous iteration of the budget deck, and I think that with the new introduction of another card to use Reboot with, is making the deck a little bit better than what it used to do in the past, because now we could change up some of the cards to better incorporate what this new card is doing and what some of the other new cards that BT06 brings to the table are offering. So I do think that this is going to be a pretty fun and decent budget deck for you to be using as a result, with a decent amount of flexibility and upgrade options and paths that you could take. So without further ado, on to the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Kapurimon still as the main Digitama, just because it's interacting with the Reboot mechanic directly. So what this card is doing is it has the inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has the Reboot ability, then it gains plus 1000 DP, so it's just making our Digimon a little bit stronger than they normally would be. And then as far as the 5th Digitama of the deck goes, well, we really only have 2 options, so I'm going to be choosing the latter option and going to be saying Pagumon is probably the best 5th Digitama we could be using. Pagumon's probably good enough to be the main Digitama, but I digress, and what this card is doing is it has the nice inheritable ability of on delete. We get to reveal the top card of our deck, and then if that card is a black Digimon, then we get to add it to our hand, otherwise it goes to the bottom. So this is just rewarding us for having our Digimon be deleted, which we're not actively looking to try to get our Digimon deleted, so that's kind of why I left Pagumon as the 5th Digitama, is because I'd rather take the DP boost to make our Digimon stronger than to have a card that only triggers when our Digimon are dying, which we're not trying to do. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Chuman. So Chuman is a really important card to be playing around with now more than ever, just because there's lots of different ways of gaining memory in the game, and Chuman is a good card to help prevent the opponent from gaining as much memory as they possibly can. So what this card is doing more specifically is he has the ability where during all turns, your opponent can't gain memory except by tamer effects. So he'll shut off the opponent's ability to gain memory off of their Digimon and options, which is pretty important because that's the primary way they're going to be gaining lots of additional memory out of nowhere. So that way you could stop some of their memory manipulating shenanigans to limit what they can and can't do, making Chuman just a very fantastic card for the deck to be using. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Junkmon. So we're really only using Junkmon for his inheritable ability of on delete gain a memory, which could be pretty obnoxious because depending on our stack, we could line them up with some blockers, or we could even just have them sit passively in our megas. So that way it just adds a little bit more value to our megas when our mega gets deleted. So that's really the only reason why I'm running this card, and it could be really anything you feel like you want to be using, but for the style of deck that this is, I just think that Junkmon benefits what this deck is doing. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Chikuriman. So Chikuriman, we're really only playing just because he's a security Digimon. We don't care about anything else about him. Most of the time, we're just going to be evolving him in Raising, so that way we don't really feel the downside of him having only 1000 DP. What Chikuriman is doing is he does have the nice security ability where at the end of the battle, we get to de-digivolve 1 on one of the opponent's Digimon, making it a little bit more obnoxious for them to keep a solid Digimon on the field, just because we have multiple different ways of de-digivolving their Digimon with no real downside because we don't have to run options to allow us to do that. So the fact that Chikuriman just is a security Digimon, even though he doesn't play himself for free, is still just very, very valuable for what the deck is doing. But again, it could really be anything you feel like you want to be using. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Toy Agumon. Yes, this is the starter deck Toy Agumon and not the Reboot Toy Agumon, and I'm only running the starter deck version of Toy Agumon because we don't need the Reboot Toy Agumon, because our top end all has Reboot anyway. So I don't feel like I need the inheritable to give an ability that they already have, so I feel like it's best served on Toy Agumon, where he could actually have some benefit for the deck because he's acting as a good card draw engine for what the deck is trying to do. So he has the nice inheritable ability where at the end of the opponent's turn, if the opponent didn't attack with the Digimon this turn, then we get to draw 1 card. So even though his ability to help us draw cards isn't as consistent as some of the other colors and other cards we could be using, it's still just a decent inheritable ability to have to sit on the field for when we form certain stacks and get into certain board states. Then the card will be helping us draw immensely. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT02 version of Greymon, and this Greymon is really good because he has the nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Reboot, it also gains jamming. So jamming will just allow our Digimon to be very safe swinging into the opponent's security, and that could allow our higher levels to be even more aggressive than they normally are, making him just really, really good to be using as a result. But if you don't necessarily care about him being a Greymon and you want to run something for basically the exact same ability, we do have Black Gaugamon as another card to run 4 copies of, just because we want as many instances of this ability as we possibly can, so we can consistently see it as often as we possibly can. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Dark Tyrannomon. So this card is just another flex spot of the deck also. We're really just using him for his blocker ability. We don't necessarily care about anything else about the card, but he does have the added benefit of it being a tempo efficient card, evoing for 1, allowing us to easily digivolve into him and past him when we need to. So this is a really good card to use in the early game paired up with Toy Agumon, so that way we could try to get some early game card draw in, and that's just really, really good. And then when we need to digivolve on top of him into something else, then we have that available option to us as well, because it was so easy to digivolve into this card. But again, it could really be any other blocker you feel like you want to run, and black is definitely a color that's not short on really good blockers you could be using. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 3 copies of MetalGreymon. So MetalGreymon is a really fantastic card for the deck to be using because he has the Reboot ability native to him. So paired up with our other champions, either Black Gaugamon or Greymon, he'll have the jamming ability, so that way we could actually think about aggressing relatively early with our level 5s, which is pretty good. And with Kapurimon, he'll have 8,000 DP versus 7,000 DP, so he'll be able to get past a lot of decently sized blockers that the opponent could be threatening us with. But on top of him natively having the Reboot ability, allowing us to aggress early with him, he also has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Reboot, it gains Security Attack +1. So that Security Attack +1 is really important because it allows us to deal even more damage than we normally would, just making this MetalGreymon a very good card to be using as a whole. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Black Mach Gaugamon. So Black Mach Gaugamon is doing basically almost the exact same thing as MetalGreymon, and the only real difference is in their inheritable ability, where during your turn, while the Digimon has Reboot, it gets plus 2,000 DP. So I do probably prefer running the Security Tech Plus over the DP boost, but sometimes we do just need the DP boost for various reasons, and they're both just very fantastic cards because, again, early to mid-game Reboot card, so that way we could think about swinging with our level 5s with a decent inheritable for our megas to be using. But speaking of our inheritable abilities, next I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalGreymon. So MetalGreymon is a really good card to be using with this deck because he gives the inheritable ability of Blocker, which pairs nicely with Reboot, so that way we could have Reboot blockers on both of our megas that we're going to be using in the deck, allowing us to both aggress and defend almost at the exact same time. Next, onto the megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Black Greymon. So Black Greymon from BT05 is an absolutely insane card to be working with on a budget because of how good this card can be still. So what this card is doing is he has 2 keywords, Security Attack +1 and Reboot. So Security Attack +1 just means he's going to punch the opponent's security a little bit harder than your average card, getting an extra damage in, and then Reboot just means he'll unsuspend himself during the opponent's unsuspend phase. So if we pair him up with a whole bunch of different abilities, this card can absolutely be a nightmare for the opponent to deal with. We could pair him up with Blocker to basically make him a Reboot blocker. We could pair him up with Jamming, Security Attack +1, so that way he could punch even harder into the opponent's security, and the Jamming ability will make him safe. So there's just lots of different ways that we could support Black Greymon depending on what our stacks are looking like, and there's no real bad stack or wrong stack to use with this card because of everything that we're doing with the deck and how we're running the deck. And then as far as the secondary or supporting mega of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Pile Volcamon. So Pile Volcamon is a really decent Digimon just because he evos a little bit more efficiently than Black War Greymon. And then on top of that, he also has the Reboot ability, so all of the same Reboot synergies that applied to Black War Greymon will apply to here as well. And on top of that, he also has a decent upside, where during the opponent's turn, once per turn, when one of your other Digimon is deleted, then you get to de-digivolve one on one of the opponent's Digimon. So for our other Digimon that are being deleted, we get to de-digivolve one, which could be pretty annoying for the opponent to deal with just because we have multiple different ways to de-digivolve the opponent's Digimon with very little effort on our part. So even though this ability might not trigger all of the time, it's still nice to have, and we do have other cards you could think about running in the deck to pair up with this card, so that way you could actually try to get the ability a little bit more consistently. But regardless, it's still just a decent card to be using just because it's a cheap, efficient card with the Reboot ability with a decent upside to running him. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Final Zubagon Punch. So Final Zubagon Punch is still just that good of a card to be running because, well, we could easily trigger this card based on how the deck is currently constructed. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability where one of your Digimon gets plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's next turn, so this will persist through yours and the opponent's turn. And then if that Digimon has 16,000 DP or more, then it gains the blocker ability, the Reboot ability, and an extra security attack +1. So that's just a lot of things to slap on a card, and we have very easy ways to trigger this card depending on what mega we're going to be using. So all of our megas can be even more powerful than they normally would be with Final Zubagon Punch. So as an example, if we are running Pile Volcamon, then we have Black Mach Galgamon to help him get up to that 13, so that way Final Zubagon Punch will put him to the 16, so he could gain the blocker and security attack +1. We have Black War Greymon, and we have Kapurimon to think about. We even have Black War Greymon and Black Mach Galgamon. So there's just a couple of different ways in the deck to allow us to use Final Zubagon Punch to its utmost potential, allowing us to just, well, use it to make it very hard for the opponents to do anything about what we're trying to do. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Iron Fisted Onslaught. So Iron Fisted Onslaught, for all intents and purposes right now, is Black's equivalent to Gaia Force, except it could actually be a little bit better / worse than Gaia Force depending on the current board state that we're looking at when we're going to be using this card. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability where it gets to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the highest play cost. So if they have multiple copies of the same mega, then this card will delete those megas, but if at worst they just have one mega on their field, there's a very high chance that this is going to be deleting that mega. There are a couple of cards where they do have a higher play cost than certain megas, and that's far and few instances, so most of the time we're just using this card to pick off a mega as one of the best removal cards we have to be using. And then it has the nice powerful security ability of activating its main effect, so that way it's still a threat even coming out of our security. And then lastly, onto the tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Izzy. So this is the BT04 Izzy, and this Izzy is going to be acting as the memory fixing tamer for the deck. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just hard set it to 3, and that's just really good, making our plays as efficient and consistent as we can possibly make it, because he also has the added benefit of an on-play ability, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and then if all of those revealed cards are black, then we get to gain 1 memory and place them back on top in any order. So that could help fix our card draw and set certain lines of play up, so that way we know what's going to be coming, so that way we could plan and adjust our game plan accordingly. So Izzy's just a really good card for that, and the fact that we gain that memory on his on-play ability means that out of the security, we could actually use this ability defensively to try to take a memory away from the opponent if we're not hard playing him ourselves. But the fact that he does gain that memory on our turn means that he's also going to be a slightly more efficient memory fixing tamer than what we could be using otherwise. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Izzy and Joe. So Izzy and Joe is a duo tamer, and this is a really good duo tamer for what we want out of the deck. So it has the nice ability where at the start of the turn, if the opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, then we get to gain 2 memory. so it has a very easy condition on gaining 2 additional memory. So if we pair this up with our memory fixing tamer, we could potentially go up to 5 memory between the two of them, which is just a lot of memory to be working with at the start of our turn by default. And then on top of that, this card also has a really nice upside to running it, where during the opponent's turn, when one of your black Digimon is deleted, then we get to suspend this tamer to draw a card. Black usually has a huge problem with its lack of card draw, so any way we have to draw cards is always welcome in the deck. And then, as I mentioned before, there's just a whole bunch of other cards you could think about running depending on what you want to be gaining out of the deck. So if you want to run some other megas and not necessarily focus on megas with the reboot mechanic innately to them, then Toy Agumon is one of the best, if not the best, inheritable ability we have next to the Promo Tsunorizumon. So the Promo Tsunorizumon is a really fantastic card just because he has 2 very strong abilities of giving our black Digimon with 13,000 or more security attack +1, or if he's passively sitting on the field for that same type of condition, he could give our Digimon piercing, which will make it even easier for us to aggress onto the opponent with. Then if you want to run a more Digiburst style of deck, we also have BT04 Tsunorizumon to just interact with the Digiburst mechanic, allowing us to add him to our hand instead of him just going to the trash for using our Digiburst abilities, which black has a couple of decent ones that we could use. Then if you want some more tempo efficiency cards, we have Numamon and Takemon to be playing if you just want to try to climb the stages as quickly and efficiently as you possibly can. And we do have some really good alternative blockers that you could think about using in the form of Sealstromon, and we also have Mechanorimon as 2 of the best blockers that we have. You could use Garurumon, but it's just a whatever card, same thing with Shademon. They're just all blockers at the end of the day. Then as far as some other really good level 5s you could consider running, depending on, again, what you're going to be wanting to try to support, you could run Gogmamon just because he has the Digiburst ability native to him to give plus 2000 DP that extends all the way to the end of the opponent's turn, with an inheritable of just a generic 1000 DP boost during all turns, making your Digimon that much more annoying to deal with, especially if they have the blocker and various other abilities attached to them. Then we also have Warumanzemon as well, another tempo efficiency card for our level 5 slot. It's the only one black has, so it's just important to keep in mind. Then we also do have Gigadramon as another very fantastic card that could allow you to transition and use certain red cards, and on top of that he has a nice inheritable ability that's DP boosting your Digimon during the opponent's turn, which could be important depending again on what cards you're trying to support and what you're doubling down on. And then we also have Volcanomon as another decent way to try to give our Digimon even more security attack plus. So if you are trying to build for a more one-punch type strategy, then having the consistency on trying to gain as much security attack plus might be what you're looking for. And then if you are looking to use a red transition, then we still have Megadramon to pair up with Gigadramon. So that way between the two of them, we could run any red top end card we feel like we want to be running if you want to go that direction. But the fact that this card also has a good inheritable for our black Digimon to be using, because while he's on the field, he's also treated as a black Digimon. He'll just help DP boost our Digimon generically, so they don't necessarily need to have the reboot ability to take advantage of this card. And then we have a whole bunch of different black megas you could be running in the deck. So the ones to highlight are going to be Greymon, just because he has the blocker and reboot ability native to him, and he's a Greymon by name, so that actually could matter depending on your build. Then on top of that, you also have MetalGreymon, which has reboot and the Digiburst ability, and his Digiburst ability is really good, either acting as some removal or burning the opponent's security, so that's pretty decent to be using overall. Then if you are taking the deck in a more Digiburst direction, we also have the promo Black Greymon to Digiburst to unsuspend himself. So again, if you're playing into like a one-punch type strategy, then you could use multiple instances of Security Attack Plus paired up with this card to deal lots of damage relatively quickly. And then we even have starter deck Blitz Greymon to think about, just because he natively has Security Attack Plus and the Digiburst 2 ability if you're playing with Digiburst to DP boost your Digimon until the end of the opponent's turn. So it's just another way to easily turn Final Zubugan Punch online. It's another Greymon to consider using. Well, all of our Megas are Greymons and garurumons if you're taking the deck in that direction, but it's just a good generic card to be using all around. And then black has just a whole bunch of different level 7s that you could be using. So I'm only going to be highlighting Omnimon's Thwart Defeat just because it's a security Digimon, it's a free level 7, and it's one of the few cards that can interact with on-delete abilities, which we do have some synergy for in the deck, and it also has a nice when Digivolving ability to be able to delete the opponent's tamer. So it's just one of the best level 7s we could be using, but you could think about using Omnimon Alter S, Omnimon Zwarte, Chaosmon, and Millenniumon as all very good level 7s that you could be running in the deck instead of Omnimon's Thwart Defeat if you want to run a level 7. Then we do have another really powerful removal option card in the deck to think about in the form of Ultimate Flare. So if you want some more varied forms of removal, then between Iron Fisted Onslaught and Ultimate Flare, they're both just very good cards at removing the opponent's Digimon, and they both have the potential to remove multiple bodies, which is really, really good. But if you do want to add some more consistency to the deck, then you also could think about running Black Memory Boost because, well, it's a Memory Boost card. These cards are always just generically good to run because checking the top 4 for any Black Digimon card is just that good to add to the overall consistency, with the main ability of Delay 2 to gain 2 memory at a later turn back, making it just a very good card to use generically. Then if you do want to run some alternate tamers in the deck, you do have the Black Tie if you really want just an alternate memory fixing tamer to try to DP boost your Digimon during the opponent's turn. So that's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world to do. Depending on your build, it actually could or couldn't matter. Then you also have Takumi to help you draw more cards. You don't care about the downside that he's putting on your level 3s because you're not swinging with your level 3s. So this is just a good card to run to try to draw more cards as a result. And then you even could build the deck in a Nokia style, even though there's not too many mid-level Greymons and low-level Agumons for us to be using. It's still really nice to use her if we're going to be going up into our Greymon high levels and our Omnimon high levels as well. So just in case anyone didn't realize, Bandai actually does have demo decks for Digimon, and this is the deck list for the demo deck. So I feel like this deck should be an easy transition or upgrade in order to make a full deck out of what they are giving you. It's still a pretty decent deck to be using just because it's doing some generically good things, and Black as a whole is slowly getting better and better the more generic tools that they get added into their toolkit. So I do think there is just a decent amount of depth and variety that you could gain out of a deck like this, and this should be a relatively decent and a cheap / affordable deck, especially if you picked up any of the demo decks that Digimon was offering in stores. So I think this is just an absolutely fantastic deck for new players to get into, just because it's doing a lot, it's doing some very powerful things, and it's relatively cheap and affordable. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.